Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into a literal microscopic battle for survival that is probably happening right now in your very own CRISPR drawer. Seriously, I'm so excited to share this with you because we're exploring this wild intersection of biology and materials science, looking at how the food industry is tackling an absolutely massive challenge, keeping our fresh produce, well, actually fresh.
Look, we've all been there, right? You buy this gorgeous, vibrant bag of fresh spinach, or maybe some perfectly firm peaches, and literally days later, it's just wilted, unappetizing sludge. It is so frustrating. But let's unpack exactly why this happens. Because the scientific reality behind that decay, it's way more complex and honestly, way more fascinating than you might think.
Okay, prepare yourself for this. Fresh produce doesn't actually die the moment it's picked from the plant. It is still very much alive. It's still breathing. And to keep its cells intact, it is actively consuming its own nutrient reserves just to survive. It is basically fighting a ticking clock from the exact second it gets harvested. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover how produce is still alive. Second, the environmental tightrope walk. Third, the plastic packaging problem. Fourth, next-gen protein packaging. And finally, the future of smart packaging.
Let's jump right into part one. Produce is still alive and the biology of breathing food.
So during this breathing process, which scientists call respiration, these plants are breaking down their stored carbohydrates into glucose. Then they burn that glucose to produce carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Think of it like a biological furnace. But here's the catch. As soon as that primary fuel runs out, the plant starts cannibalizing its other resources. It literally breaks down its own cellular structures and fats. Once those are gone, the produce finally dies. Ultimately, the shelf life of your fruits and veggies is completely dictated by this respiration rate.
And what's wild is that different fruits handle this aging process in totally different ways. Take climacteric fruits, for instance, things like peaches, apples, and kiwis. They experience what's called a respiration crisis. They pump out a massive, self-fueling spike of the growth hormone ethylene to trigger ripening, which leads to rapid softening or even internal browning. But then you have non-climacteric fruits, like citrus and small red fruits, and they don't synthesize ethylene this way at all. They have a completely different aging profile.
But you know what's really crazy? How our own food prep actively sabotages this process. Minimal processing, like peeling, slicing, or destoning, causes major mechanical stress. Just the simple act of chopping a vegetable skyrockets its respiration rate by up to 8 times. 8! It even boosts ethylene production by up to 20-fold, which just hits the fast-forward button on microbial spoilage and that gross brown discoloration.
Moving on to part two, the environmental tightrope walk, balancing temperature, gas, and water.
Let's talk about water first. Fresh produce is over 90% water. As the plant breathes, water vapor sneaks out into the surrounding air, drying it out, and it only takes a tiny 5% water loss for a vegetable to look noticeably wilted, which completely tanks its commercial value, not to mention ruining its aroma, flavor, and nutrition. Although, fun fact, a tiny bit of dehydration actually helps certain veggies like common mushrooms. I mean, nobody wants a soggy mushroom, right? The main takeaway here is that preserving produce is an incredibly delicate balancing act. You might be thinking, well, just freeze it or vacuum seal it. But dropping the temperature or oxygen too much creates huge problems. For instance, respiration doubles or triples for every 10 degrees Celsius rise in temp. But if you try to fix that by refrigerating certain exotic fruits, they get chilling injuries, like internal browning known as core flush. Lowering oxygen helps, sure, but if you go too low, you completely starve them, a state called anoxia, which breeds anaerobic bacteria and creates awful off flavors. And while pumping up the CO2 limits ethylene, if you cross a certain threshold, your lettuce gets brown spots and your mushrooms turn yellow. It is a total tightrope walk.
Which brings us to part 3, the plastic packaging problem. Why traditional bags fail.
Synthetic polymers like low-density polyethylene, or PVC, have a major, unavoidable physical limitation: their gas-perm selectivity. Basically, this just means how well they let specific gases filter through. Traditional perforated plastic lets CO2 and oxygen pass through at almost the exact same rate. Because of this, it is physically impossible to lower the oxygen inside the bag to that sweet spot of 1 to 5% without accidentally trapping a dangerously high 15 to 20% buildup of CO2. Unless a plant naturally loves CO2, the plastic is literally suffocating it.
And here's the real kicker. Synthetic plastics are completely blind to temperature changes. Let's say a delivery truck's refrigeration system fails. The temperature spikes, and the plant inside the bag immediately starts breathing faster. But the plastic bag? Its permeability doesn't adapt at all to match that faster respiration. So the gases get trapped, the air inside becomes toxic to the plant, and the food is ruined before it even makes it to the grocery store.
So what's the solution? That's part 4, next-gen protein packaging. Enter wheat gluten. When scientists compared standard LDP plastic to a film made of wheat gluten, the results were mind-blowing. In a totally dry environment, wheat gluten is actually hundreds of times less permeable than plastic. But, and this is the genius part, in a 95% humidity environment, like the sweaty inside of a fresh salad bag, the water actually softens and opens up the protein matrix. Suddenly, the wheat gluten becomes 10 times more permeable to CO2 than standard plastic. It effectively starts breathing right alongside the produce. Even better, when the temperature rises, this film's permeability scales up at nearly the exact same rate as the plant's respiration. It literally self-adjusts to save the food.
Now, there is one small problem. Wheat gluten by itself is structurally pretty weak, but material scientists are fixing this by creating nanocomposites. By reinforcing the wheat gluten with paper and microscopic monomerillinite or MMT clay, they can make the packaging incredibly tough. And the best part, it keeps all those amazing, adaptable, moisture-sensitive gas barrier properties. It stays fully responsive to its environment.
Finally, let's look at part 5, the future of smart packaging. Active, MAP, and essential oils. Researchers are taking this to the next level by embedding plant-derived antimicrobial compounds like carvocrol from oregano essential oil directly into these wheat gluten nanocomposites. It acts like a smart, environmentally triggered bodyguard. Imagine a warehouse at 60% humidity. During this dry storage step, the clay and protein network firmly locks in the antimicrobial oil so it doesn't evaporate. But the instant you add moist, fresh food, the humidity inside the package spikes to 100%. This triggers the packaging to open up, starting a slow, controlled 13-day release of the carvocrol directly onto the food. It kills spoilage bacteria exactly when they are most likely to strike. It is a complete paradigm shift, right? We are moving away from the passive, suffocating plastics of the past. As we wrap up this explainer, you really have to wonder, with this kind of incredible science already here, when will our grocery aisles fully embrace these living, breathing biopackages and finally put an end to global food waste?